Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we're doing another Women of Horror Spotlight. Today I have with us an author, and she has a new book coming out in August. And it's called Lost Charity. I have with us Brianna Malaki. Brianna, welcome to the Horror Room.
Yay! Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you on. So tell us a little bit about Lost Charity.
Yeah, so Lost Cherry is a horror poetry collection, and it's going to be published with January Ember Press. They're a relatively new press. They just started releasing stuff either this past winter or the beginning of the year. And the poetry collection is kind of takes you along the process of, can you fall in love with and be in love with evil creatures, supernatural beings, all those sorts of very obvious red flags.
Yes.
But it kind of so it takes you through those different types of situations, and each section is a different type of creature that you see a lot in horror.
Now, did you base this off of like there's evil people in the world? I guess you can say, and
Yeah.
and we've definitely, some of us has fallen in love with some. Did you base some of that off of that?
So when I first started putting it together, it was kind of the play between, seeing those red flags in relationships and then like just putting it as a mortal falling in love with a demon and like those red flags popping up. Because, a lot of portrayals of demons are human, right?
Yes.
They look like humans. So it was that pairing. And then I was like, oh, but, there are also vampires and werewolves and all these different things. And I was like, and they're not necessarily human form. And so it kind of spiraled from there. But it was that connection between things that you are maybe not necessarily notice in a relationship as a red flag, but then just like, okay, but if a siren was doing that, oh, that's a red flag.
So what are three things that most people don't know is a red flag that maybe you might see in some of these poetries?
Yeah, I think one of them is kind of like attention. So, in a lot of relationships, you need to have open communication, right? But so with some, and I think one of them, for a good example of what I'm trying to say, is with the sirens. And, in a lot of the mythology, they are female and they want male sailors. And so some of the pieces I have are more female humans wanting to be in love with the sirens. Like they are in love with the sirens, but the sirens, they're just like, nah, no, I love you, but, and all of their focus is on another person, right? Like they're trying to find that sailor. So that kind of that, and there's some of the lies, I think, is another one, stuff that, well, if they could lie about that, what else are they lying about?
Yeah. Small lies turn into big lies.
And so it's that sort of stuff that you would see pop up and you'd be like, oh.
So I mean, have you always wrote poetry?
I think, I've been writing poetry in some form, mainly for myself and then looking for publication forever. Like since high school is probably when I started being interested in poetry, and then just writing it for myself. And then it wasn't until maybe like 4 or 5 years ago that I actually sat down with the intention for publication and started going through that and finding that there's horror poetry, like specifically, it doesn't necessarily have to overlap with another genre. So that was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've just recently learned that within the last year or so having a show. I was like, there's horror poetry, and
Yeah.
and if you think about it, like poetry and horror kind of come together in a nice little way. If you think about it.
Yeah, and one of the things I think kind of help people consider getting into poetry and horror is, well, do you like short stories?
Hmm.
Do you like flash fiction? Take a short story, cut it in half, cut it in half again, that's poetry.
It is.
And so, and depending on what you get, with a collection or an anthology where it's a bunch of different authors, there's usually, an overarching theme. And I know I don't do it, but some poets where it is a entire story, right? But it's all
Hmm.
these different poems. So I'm like, don't just rule it out because it's poetry. If you like what the theme is, or what the back where they're like, this collection is going to go take you on a journey from this, give it a shot, because poetry is just kind of like flash fiction in a different layout.
It really is. Or I mean, I can even break it down to a film. It's like a short film, and like
Yes. Yeah.
it gives you a story and it ties up all the pieces
Yeah.
in a short period of time.
And that's one of my favorite things, maybe why I love poetry so much, is you have to tell a story in a page, give or take, right? So,
Hmm.
sometimes it's maybe around 200 words, or 30 lines, and you have to tell a whole story. So it's kind of a puzzle, and that's one reason I really like writing poetry, is trying to figure that out. Like, okay, what is the most important part of the
Hmm.
story? What needs to be included? What's just kind of fluff? So,
Now, do you have any writing rituals? I should say. Do you have to be in a certain mood? Does the lights have to be dim? Do you have to have a glass of wine? Do you? I mean, did you ever have
uh,
like an edible? I mean, is
yeah.
there a specific ritual do you have when it comes to writing?
So I'm definitely kind of a mood writer, which is one reason I like to have multiple projects to work on. But like with Lost Cherry, I made a playlist. So I would listen to it, and would have Pinterest mood boards pulled up, so I can just be like, okay, this is the vibe. We're in the setting, you know. So that's kind of, and then as far as, yeah, like setting everything up, I'll have at least 3 beverages.
Hmm.
I have my water bottle. I have a sparkly
Yes.
beverage, making sure I don't have to leave my
Yes.
desk. So if I get into the groove, I have some snacks nearby, like I can just work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the music is probably the music, and like mood boards are the highlight of like my writing ritual, is just like setting the mood for me for the project. Yeah.
Now, do you ever do pissed off writing? Like you're in a bad mood, and you know what, this is going to comfort me. This is going to slow me down.
Yeah, I do. And I am one of those people that like to handwrite. And
Hmm.
so that's, yeah, I would say if I'm just like, yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write everything down. And then, depending on if it was angry writing or not, I may not be able to read my handwriting. So then it's kind of like, I'll handwrite it, and then maybe the next day is when I'll go through my notebook to type up what I've written, and I'm like, okay, let's see what makes the most sense. And that kind of, yeah, helps work out those feelings.
Now, with that, do you ever adapt people, like real life people, from your personal experience into your stories?
Yeah, I would say for sure.
Okay. Now, if that person read a story, would they know that you were talking about them or describing them?
Ooh, I'm not sure. Because it's not like you use all the descriptors, right?
Hmm.
But I will say I had one of my non-horror poetry collections. Um, I wrote a lot about like some family and like loss and stuff. And my friend had read it and she messaged me and she was like, I know exactly who these things are about. But if you didn't know me, you wouldn't. You know, that those descriptors of who they are to the narrator aren't necessarily there. So you don't know who they are actually. But she was like, oh, you know, is this about da da da? I'm like, yeah, okay.
because because I'm not a writer, but I can imagine that like I would put like real life situations that I'm going through some type of way. I feel like it would interpret into my stories.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's one thing I do is with poetry and maybe not necessarily just stuff for myself, right? Stuff that just
Hmm.
gets saved on my computer in a little folder and may never be read by anyone else. But yeah, working out some different situations and you know playing through. Well, what if I felt this way?
Yeah.
You know, maybe you get really frustrated and it's horror poetry, so you get to kill people off and then you feel slightly better.
Now, is there a piece of poetry that you've written, and for whatever reason, you're like, I'm not ready to put this. I want to put it out, but I'm not ready to put it out yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a couple pieces. There's one piece, so I did a writer's residency in October, this past October, and it was amazing. And I wrote a ton of stuff. Like, this is where Lost Cherry was created. And I had all these extras. And one of my favorite poems that I've ever written, I wrote while there. And it's one of those pieces that I'm like, I don't want to give up unless it feels right. So I haven't submitted it anywhere because I haven't found a place, you know, an open call where I'm like, okay, it deserves to be. I would be proud if it got published there, you know, and unfortunately it doesn't fit with Lost Cherry. So it's just one of those pieces where I'm like, I love this. Eventually someone, you know, people might get to read it, but not yet.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Now, you are a pretty new writer when it comes to publishing. Now, what
mhm.
are some? I mean, I have a lot of watchers who are, are self-publishing or they're thinking about publishing their first piece of work. What are
Yeah.
some advice you can give them when it comes to selecting a press, publishing house? What are some advice you can give them?
Yeah. So one, I have a couple tips. So one, I would say stay organized. You know, depending on where you submit, they might not allow simultaneous submissions, and so you just want to keep track of stuff uh, where you're sending it. You know, sometimes places will say, "Oh, we'll let you know in 1 to 3 months, but if you don't hear from us, ask at this point." So you want to stay on top of stuff, and so I use a spreadsheet. I think it's the easiest, and you know, then you can kind of keep track of your rejections and your acceptances, and see if there's a piece that's been rejected a couple times. Maybe you make version 2 of it, and then try that. Um, Another tip I would say is don't just blindly submit to places. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff, you know, publishers and authors associated with publishers may be, you know, saying the wrong things, and then they're, you know, everyone's against them, canceled. There we go. And so
Yes.
you always want to make sure that the place that you're submitting to aligns with your values, and then your work makes sense for them. So if
Yes.
some place is purely splatterpunk,
Hmm.
you know, super gory, you're not going to submit a middle school horror short story to them.
I hope
So,
not.
and then, you know, because you don't want to be put on a
Yeah.
list of any kind.
Hmm.
So it's, you know, you want to be respectful of their time and your time. And so that's kind of the big one is doing that spend that extra time to look into the press that you're thinking of submitting to. Make sure you're a good fit, make sure they're a good fit for you, and then submit.
Okay.
So
Now, what about like a new press that's only been around for a short period of time? How do you kind of filter them out? Or
yeah. So like I said, January Ember Press is relatively new. However, I've worked with the editor that is with them before on projects, and so I know their work. I know their work as an editor, creating and working on different anthologies that I've been a part of, and so it was kind of, they have vouched for them, and so that process, I was like, okay, this makes sense. I like the stuff that they say they are publishing.
Mhm.
That kind of seems like a good fit. They do poetry, and so especially with poetry, it's kind of hard to find horror presses that also do poetry. So,
Yeah.
so when you find one, it's kind of like, okay, let me really look into them. So that was with January Ember Press. I knew the editor, and I knew one of the authors that was getting published with them. And so for me, that was worth it. For other new presses, I would say look at who's on staff, just some Google searches. If they have very, very limited information, it's your judgment call. It's you can't know everything, but I would say look at their staff, see what other projects they've worked on and all of that, and then do a little sleuthing.
Yes. Yes. Because I tell my audience too, even when it comes to film festivals and stuff like that, you definitely got to do your research.
Yeah.
You really do, because there's a lot of them out there now. There's a lot of them out there now, and you don't know who's legit and who's not, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and some places, maybe they don't list everything. And so, yeah, you just have to take a little time, do it in the research phase, so it's not an, oh no, I signed a contract, they're horrible, all of that. So it saves you a headache.
Yes. Now it sounds like you've been with a press that like some shit happened. Now, how do you get out of that?
So, definitely, I've done it when it comes to a contract, and I'm like, oh, I'm not signing this.
Mhm.
And so that's been my situation before with a couple places, where maybe they've changed the timeline, but it wasn't something that we discussed, or the royalties. And so you have to read everything. Don't just be a writer, be a reader.
Yes.
And and vouch for yourself, stand up for yourself. It's hard when you're indie and you're just getting started, but know your worth, and your time is money. And so some places not being willing to negotiate, or just kind of, yeah, I've had some places where they're like, yeah, we'll accept your work, and then it was months of silence, and then it was, oh, here's your contract, we're pushing this out to such and such, and we're no longer doing this cent per word, it's this cent per word. And I was like, okay, well, 3 months ago it was this and this. So and I've just pulled my stuff from working with them, because if they're already changing stuff, like, who knows what else could happen.
Small lies become big lies, right?
Yeah, exactly. So and yeah, as an author, everything's attached to your name. So if you're part of something and then it's a big scandal, like, your name is still a part of it, and it's really hard, even if you didn't do anything, to get removed.
Yeah. Because I can imagine, like, if you're a new indie horror author and like you submit your stuff to everyone and get rejected, and somebody finally says yes, you probably get excited and you probably just sign away. You're like, right. Somebody actually wants to publish my work, and
yeah,
maybe that's not always a good thing. That's why you're doing it.
a lot of times too, like you get your rights back. And so that's something else, right? So a lot of times publishers are buying the rights for X number of years. And after that, it reverts back to you. And so, but then even then, it's still something that's been published. And so from now on, it'll be considered a reprint.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing you have to think about. You know, because when you're just starting out, even when I first started, I was just excited places wanted to publish my poetry. And so I have a handful of things that are in books that were unpaid.
Wow.
And, you know, I'll get those rights back in X number of years, but they'll be considered reprints. And so then depending on submissions, those submissions have to be open to reprints, right? So that's kind of something I wish I didn't really do when I first started, but I was very excited that places wanted poetry. And so I have a handful of poems that are in anthologies that were unpaid. So they were paid with a copy of the book. So, but for me it was, okay, but this gives me something to say I'm published, to then have an author's bio.
Yes, to move up and something to say, hey, look, I'm legit.
And I'll still occasionally do unpaid stuff, but it's only for charity anthologies. So like I submitted, I'm in, it's called Shards by Ravensquoth Press, and 100% of the proceeds from that book go to a couple different like mental health organizations.
Oh, nice.
So like when it's you know, I'm 100% on board for the charity anthologies because all of the proceeds go. And that publisher I really like working with because they are very transparent. Like they tell you what profit was made and what, you know, that it got donated. So
that's always amazing.
It's not hidden.
Yes. Now, have you ever thought about doing a YouTube channel, like a one-on-one for new indie horror writers, and what to do and what not to do?
No.
Oh,
that sounds like a lot of work.
It is.
But I'm co-chair of the Seattle chapter of the Horror Writers Association, and one of the things that I'm currently working on that I will probably do summer, early fall with my chapter is one-on-one, like social media branding meetings, because that's kind of what I do full time is social media, events, marketing, all of that stuff. So that's sort of something I'm working on, kind of a workshop setting so that I can do it one-on-one with people, but I have not thought about a YouTube channel.
No, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
I enjoy doing stuff like this, and I've been on a couple different podcasts and everything, and I like being the guest. I like showing up. I like chatting, and then I like leaving.
Brianna, I'm so tired.
I bet. You have so many.
I know. I do like 3 interviews a night. I'm tired.
Like, I just save. I'm like, okay, watch later. Because I subscribe to all these different ones because I like the content, and my YouTube is always like, you have a new video. I'm like, how? Who's it from?
You're like, it's that damn horror realm. Like, damn, I'm like, every day.
You and Colin over at the Horrific podcast, because he has there's so many different segments to his, so there's always something coming up, and I'm like,
it's a lot.
What else do you guys do? I can't even imagine.
It's a lot. Like I had no idea it was going to be this much this much work when I signed up. I thought, I'm just gonna I'm gonna hop on and do this. No, it turned into like a full-time job.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about reviews, and people. I was there to learn how to craft like a better review. So when I just read books like personally, I can just
Mhm.
actually leave a good review for the author, other than like, I like this book. Trust me,
Yeah.
I read. And everyone else, is YouTube channels or TikToks and, wanting to crank out content. And I'm like, oh, you guys are
So
making me
exhausting.
tired just talking about it. I just want to write like a little paragraph about a book so the author feels good.
I started off with my channel doing reviews, and I'm telling you, it was so exhausting. I was
Yeah.
watching so many movies. I'm taking, but here's the thing: you can't even enjoy reading a book or
I
watching
was
a
going
movie
to
because you're
ask,
sitting there with a
yeah,
pad taking fucking notes the whole entire time,
yeah, when you're
and
doing
like
movie reviews, do
it's
you
not fun.
do you get
It's not fun.
tired of watching them?
I don't do it anymore because you
Yeah.
get tired watching it because it
I was going to
becomes
say,
like you don't enjoy them. It just becomes
you can't
like
enjoy going to the movies, right? Your brain's always
no.
on.
Is on with a
Yeah.
notepad just
Ugh.
taking notes like a crazy person. But like,
Yeah.
I don't mind interviewing people and reading or watching their stuff
Mhm.
because I'm going in,
That's more of like
I
a
don't.
preparation.
Yeah, it's
Like,
and I'm not coming on to judge their work, so like it's a little easier for me to do. But yeah. YouTube is not fun, but listen, it's fun. It's fun because I guess what the fun part is
Is
that I
that
get to
fun?
interview creators like you, Brianna. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
All right, so Brianna, where can everyone find you?
Yeah. So for horror, I'm on Instagram as my name. I think it's displayed right here. Brianna
Yes.
Malatke. I'm very boring. I'm on the Slasher app also as Brianna Malatke. and and my website is just my last name, MalatkeWrites.com. And so I post all of my events there, and all of my upcoming releases and all of that is on my website. But I'm mainly on Instagram. I don't know if that says anything
Yes.
about my age, but
It shows that you are definitely under the age of 40.
I am. Yes.
Because us 40 and older, we're Facebookers, unfortunately. We're stuck.
I only have my Facebook for Horror Writers Association stuff because they use Facebook. And I like log on and there's all these messages, notifications. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, obviously, I use the Messenger app, but the actual Facebook, no. So
I use Instagram just to promote. I don't even have like a personal Instagram. I have a horror room Instagram, and that's where I promote content. So
yeah, I'm big on Instagram. So
yes, and I guess under 40 because that's what I've noticed. Yeah. Like people in their 30s and 20s do not like Facebook anymore. They're more IG fans.
Yeah.
All right, Brianna. It's been an absolute blast having you on. Listen, you're more than welcome to come on anytime. Yay. More than welcome to come on. Everybody, look out in August. By the way, where are we going to be able to find Lost Cherry?
Yeah, so obviously it'll be on Amazon, but also Barnes and Noble, and then depending on timing, it'll be local. But I live in the Pacific Northwest. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest, it'll be in some local bookstores. Otherwise, Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Sweet. Listen, everybody, in August, we're in May. In August, yes.
I know, it's months, forever away,
right? in a couple months, please grab your copy of Lost Cherry. Yes. All right, everyone, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and she is Brianna Malatke. Yep. Got it. Malatke, yeah. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.